So first, we'll consider a set of bills that represent a big step forward for some of the hardest working New Yorkers. Fair Workweek legislation will provide thousands of fast food and retail workers with more stable work conditions and protect them from exploitative scheduling practices that are all too common in these industries. I had the opportunity to gather earlier with a number of people who will benefit from these laws, who work so hard for this day. I want to commend them all. Because of their hard work, because of their activism, tens of thousands of workers will be treated with the respect they deserve. And now to go over the different pieces of legislation. Intro 1396A requires employers to give new hires a good faith written estimate of weekly hours. The bill also requires employers to give written notice of schedules at least 2 weeks before the first day of each weekly schedule, and to pay premiums to employees when the employer alters schedules. Intro 1388A regulates a practice known as clopenings, in which an employee works a late night closing shift followed by an early morning opening shift. To schedule a clopening, employers must obtain the employee's written consent and pay a premium. Intro 1395A requires fast food employers to offer any new shifts to current employees. Intro 1384A requires fast food employers to deduct and remit voluntary contributions to nonprofits when employees make a written request. The nonprofit in question must meet certain requirements. And finally, Intro 1387A prohibits certain retailers with with more than 20 employees from scheduling on-call shifts or canceling a shift within 72 hours of its start time. The bill also requires the employer to obtain written consent from an employee every time the employee agrees to work a shift with less than 72 hours notice. I want to thank Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, Consumer Affairs Commissioner Lorelei Salas. Now my pleasure to introduce the Chair of the Committee on Civil Service and Labor, Councilmember Danique Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hot? Okay, good. So, this afternoon, I had the pleasure of being in the rotunda with the mayor and the other advocates here this afternoon to introduce this just before the bill signing, as we talked about the legislation here. This Fair Week package is really groundbreaking legislation. This is coming from someone who has spent nearly 30 years around organized labor and the labor movement, representing working folk here in the city of New York. And as I said earlier, it never ceases to amaze me when people come together in order to advance the lives of working families, and no one does it better than what we do here in the city of New York. So I'm really proud of my colleagues, Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember Ferreras Copeland, Councilmember Landers, and certainly the Speaker and the Mayor, and all of those who have really stood up for working folks today. This is something that has occurred from the ground up, where working peoples have, fast food workers, retail workers have walked out, and we have been there to support them. And so I'm really proud of the fact that organized labor have put their resources behind these folks as well. So this is certainly the template for not just New York City. Certainly I'm hoping that the state can adopt it and the rest of the country, and really looking forward to working with everyone and seeing this bill come to fruition and have workers enjoy the quality of life and the dignity and respect more than anything that they deserve. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Now the sponsor of Intro 1384A and Chair of the Committee on Finance, Councilmember Jalissa Ferreras Copeland.
Thank you. Today, our city is once again leading the way nationally through the Fair Workweek packet of laws. We're taking a stand for workers in the fast food industry so that they can improve their schedules, support their families, and strengthen their communities. As the federal government and Republicans in Washington try to chip away at the rights of working people, we must resist these attacks at the local level and support our workforce. I am proud to stand with my fellow council members and Mayor de Blasio as he signs this Fair Workweek legislative package today. The Fast Food Worker Empowerment Bill, the first of its kind legislation, will allow fast food workers to gather their financial resources and focus on the issues that are important to them. enforce penalties and remedies for violations by employers who break the rules, and protect workers against retaliation from these employers. I want to once again thank my fellow co-sponsors, Councilmember Johnson and Danique Miller, and the advocates who have supported the vision behind this law. I also want to thank my staff, my Chief of Staff, Catalina Cruz, my Deputy Chief of Staff, Ivana Costa. I'm from the mayor's side, Emma Wolf, who we kept hours. I think we spoke till midnight often on this. It wasn't easy. And, you know, we must remember that this fight wasn't an easy fight, but it's one that we win rightfully so. So thank you again, Mr. Mayor. And I also want to thank Hector and Stuart for your leadership on this and for being steadfast, and the speaker. So I am proud to stand with you today, Mr. Mayor, or sit.
Sit. You worked it out in the end there. Very good. Thank you, Council Member. Now, sponsor of intros 1387A and 1388A, Councilmember Corey Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some legislation we pass in the City Council works in the abstract, involving broad and overarching policy issues. And sometimes it takes years for a new policy's effects to be seen. This package of legislation today is not that type of legislation. This package will have a direct and immediate positive effect on the lives of tens of thousands of New Yorkers, replacing uncertainty and instability with economic security and empowerment. And we're not just talking about numbers and figures, we are talking about people's lives. This is about the single mother who is forced to wait by the phone for her employer to call, knowing that she desperately needs this shift to pay her rent, but also she would have no time to arrange childcare. We're talking about the working senior who is forced to work a closing shift late into the night, followed by an opening shift early next morning on hardly any sleep. That does not represent who we are as New Yorkers. A fair work week will not only help workers provide for themselves and their families, it will also help them plan for their future. When your short-term needs are secured, you can set your sights on long-term goals, like eliminating debt, saving for retirement, or pursuing higher education. We are all in this together, and this will benefit our city as a whole. I want to thank the mayor for his leadership on this throughout the course of this legislation, Speaker Mark Viverito, my co-sponsors, Councilwoman Julissa Ferris-Copeland, Councilmember Brad Lander, and the chair of the Committee on Workforce and Civil Service, Danique Miller, as well as Rafael Espinal, the chair of the Consumer Affairs Committee. I also want to thank Hector Figueroa and 32BJ and their team, Allison Hirsch, Candace Tolliver, and David Cohen. And I really want to thank Stuart Applebaum, my longtime friend, the president of the RWDSU, and his team, Camille Rivera and Jessica Garcia, for working on this together. Today is a very big day, something we should all be proud of. And lastly, I want to thank my Deputy Chief of Staff, Louis Cholden Brown. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have 3 people signed up for public testimony. I'd like them all to come up to the microphone over there. Stuart Applebaum, Beverly Neufeld, and Joanna Stevenson.
Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you. I want to thank the speaker. I want to thank the sponsors of the legislation, and particularly the bill sponsor for the retail workers legislation, Corey Johnson. And I want to thank so many people in this room, and people who are at the rally, and people who are what makes New York what it is, because they're willing to stand up for what it is they believe in, and to know that we've got an administration that gets it and does the right thing. At a time when what is happening in America should dismay us, New York City is shining a light on a different vision of who we are and what we can be. And all New Yorkers should be very proud. What you're doing today is going to have an immediate impact on thousands upon thousands of retail workers. 1 in 9 New Yorkers is a retail worker, and they're among the lowest wage earners in our city, and they struggle to survive on often part-time work, barely making ends meet. In addition to all they face working in retail, they've been subjected to the unpredictability of on-call scheduling, which is a cruel, exploitative, computer-driven system designed to optimize employer profits while sacrificing any considerations for working women and men. And I have to say that what this does is it turns it around. This legislation turns it around. and says, we believe that all people, no matter what they do or where they do it, need to be treated with dignity and justice and respect for their own lives. And I thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
Mayor, on behalf of the Retail Action Project and all the retail workers across New York City, I would like to expand my gratitude. And this will drastically change our lives with this ban on all-call scheduling. And to the rest of you guys, I want to say thank you also, because without this, we will not be able to have succeed. And I hope to push for more things in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Beverly Neufeld. I represent 100 Organization. It's a network called Power New York. We are working collectively to move forward women's economic equality in New York City and New York City and New York State. And we just want to, add our voice of support. This has been a wonderful journey through many different pieces of legislation, the salary history ban being the most recent. And just thank the City Council and, of course, the Mayor for moving forward these women's issues legislation that really profoundly will affect the lives of women in the state and in the city. So we thank you, the 100 groups in Power New York Network, appreciate the hard work it takes to move forward these issues and the bravery it takes, the bold action that New York City is taking today at a time when Washington is moving us backward into another stage. So it's so important for cities to step up, and New York City is doing it the best way possible. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I know he couldn't be here. I also want to thank the sponsor of intros, 1395A and 1396A, Councilmember Brad Lander. And with that, I think it's time to sign these bills. Come on up.
Make sure everybody gets it.
Use the right hand.
Excuse me, sir. What can we add if you want, but you okay, so let's do 10.
You, wow. Symbol of achievement, you get a marker, 4 to 2. And you have to take those. These bills are now law. All right. Here we go. You are very welcome. You having fun? Yes. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well done, you did. Good job.
Thank you.
Good job. Congratulations again. You spoke very well. Thank you. Well done. Thank you. Well done.
Is it okay, please?
Okay, thank you. All right. We got it. One more?
Oh, one more, come on.
Okay. Let's go. Got it? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Only for you. Only for you. How you doing?
You've been blocking me all day.
Good day for your family. Pretty amazing, huh? Glad to see you're here. I need you back here now. Come on. Where's Okay, anyone who's not staying for this next piece, please find your way out. And anyone who's coming in for this, find your way in. Okay, all right.
How are you, Mr. Mayor?
Good. It's so strange to have City Hall here. I was used to it in the Bronx. I don't understand. Okay, now we're going to consider several bills, and a package of them relate to improving New Yorkers' health, and then there's one that's thrown in that's about giving voters more information. I don't know how those got grouped together, but I'm impressed. So, intro 848A obligates the Campaign Finance Board and the City Board of Elections to provide registered voters with their voter history every 4 years. Intro 951A requires all businesses and city agencies with public phone lines 2, allow direct dial 911 calls without extensions or dial codes. Intro 1028A creates a 9-member task force to review the public school sexual education curriculum and make recommendations to improve it. Intro 1346A expands the city's authority to control pollution in stormwater runoff. Intro 1456A creates a letter grade system for food carts and trucks similar to the one we have for restaurants. I want to thank Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, Small Business Services Commissioner Greg Bishop, DUIT Commissioner Ann Roast, DOH Commissioner Dr. Mary Bassett, and Councilmember Jimmy Vaca, Chair of the Committee on Technology. Now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 848A, Councilmember Richie Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was wonderful having you in the Bronx.
Thank you.
So I wish you could be there permanently.
Well, we'll be back.
I've never seen a better retail politician in Arthur Avenue, Little Italy. So you're
very kind. That's a true compliment.
It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank you for supporting the legislation as well as the Speaker. The concept of the voter history bill is straightforward. I believe the act of confronting people with their voting record creates a powerful psychological incentive to vote. None of us want to be reminded of our failure to fulfill our most basic civil duty, and those of us who do fail to vote should be held psychologically accountable for our absentee citizenship. And so every 4 years, we're going to receive a voter history. It's a record not of how you vote, but that you vote. And that has been shown empirically to boost voter participation. So I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your support.
Thank you very much. Well said. Now my pleasure to introduce the Chair of the Committee on Education, Councilmember Danny Drum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and Speaker Mark Viverito, especially Councilmember Cumbo, for all the work on sex education and healthy relationship education. All students, no matter what school they go to, what grade they are in, and what sexual orientation or gender identity they are, deserve age-appropriate and medically accurate information. I am happy that this legislation includes individuals and relationships other than heterosexual, including but not limited to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and gender nonconforming. Our schools need to make sure no LGBTQ student ever feels excluded by the deafening silence around their issues. In fact, all students benefit when LGBTQ dimension is addressed. An inclusive sex education curriculum can only foster more acceptance and a better overall school environment. My hope is that both educators and students will gain a better understanding of specific issues to the LGBT community. This legislation is another great step toward helping our schools address the needs of their LGBT students. I hope that the members of the task force will collaborate with the DOE's LGBTQ liaison to build upon the successes we've had in the past few years. And again, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Cumbo.
Thank you very much. And now the sponsor of Intro 1346A, Councilmember Costa Constantinides.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much of our sewage is transferred to wastewater treatment plants located throughout the city. However, when it rains, some of the sewage is carried out of the streets into our waterways if they're being treated and disinfected. Intro 1346 ensures that our city oversees and enforces any activities that have the potential to contribute to pollution in our waterways from the separate sewer system. It provides our city with the legal authority to implement a stormwater management program to meet the new requirements of the municipal separate storm sewer permits. The program will reduce pollution in stormwater that reaches our waterways. It will find and control litter and other sources of pollution from entering our waterways through the separate sewer system. The program includes stormwater runoff from commercial and industrial activities, runoff from active construction sites and newly developed sites, as well as the detection and elimination of illicit discharge. DEP will coordinate interagency efforts to meet the requirements of the MS4 permit. I'm especially proud this bill requires agencies to consider the feasibility of adding green infrastructure, such as permeable pavements, to any major capital project that's being built. Protecting our waterways from unnecessary environmental hazards will bring benefits to marine life, the water's ecosystems, and our entire city environment. I want to thank you, of course, Mr. Mayor, for your strong environmental leadership, and of course, our Speaker, Melissa Mark Viverito, all my council colleagues, as well as our council staff of the committee, Samara Swanston, Bill Murray, Ed Atkin, Jonathan Seltzer, and my own legislative counsel, Nick Wazowski. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 951A, Councilmember Elizabeth Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today is a good day for New York City. We are adding one more measure to make the city safer and ensuring everyone has equal direct access to life-saving emergency 911 services. I introduced this bill after a tragic incident in which a woman was killed by her estranged husband in a motel room with no means of getting help. Her 9-year-old daughter, who was present at the time, attempted to call 911, but to no avail. She was unable to get through because she did not know that you had to dial a 9 to get an outside line. In response to this tragedy, legislation known as Carly's Law, named for the victim, Carly Hunt, has been enacted in several jurisdictions, requiring that businesses with multi-line telephone systems provide direct access to 911 service. Direct access means that you no longer have to dial a number, digit, prefix, or any access number or code before dialing 911. This law requires businesses and city agencies with multi-line phone systems to configure them to provide direct access to 911. This law also requires that telephone systems be configured to provide notification of a central location for which emergency personnel can respond to. Doing so will prevent Carly Hunt's tragic circumstances from repeating and will also help to minimize any delays in contacting emergency services. I'd like to thank the mayor for signing this bill, the speaker for her support, and the council, to the committee, Malika Jabali, for her work in helping to draft this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 1028B. And as I introduce her, I want to say, Councilmember Lori Cumbo, you're voting for 2 now, aren't you?
Right.
So, Councilmember Cumbo.
I will bring that up during budget negotiations. For so many of us, sexual education is something that many of us didn't have when going through the educational system. For myself, I remember in high school, my mom saying, coming home from school, make sure you don't come home with a baby. And then in college, my mom saying the same thing. We're paying all of this money, make sure you don't come home with a baby. And that was sex education at that time. And now that I'm 40, she says, when are you gonna come home with a baby? But across the city of New York, youth ages 12 and under are making mature, life-changing decisions about relationships and their sexuality based on peer pressure and misinformation from mass media. A third of New York City high school students have not or are unsure if they have had or received sexual education. Of those who recalled sexual education, only 32% had 1 or 2 lessons, and that's today in 2017. 74% of those students reported not learning about LGBTQ identity. Nearly 50% of public high school students have had sexual intercourse, and 32% of sexually active teens did not use a condom. Teen women aged 15 to 19 account for about 1/3 of chlamydia and gonorrhea infections in New York City, the highest rates of infection among all age groups. In order to truly change the face of sex education in the city of New York, we need to re-envision what sex education could be in New York City. This bill brings us one step closer to charting a new course for youth of all ages and backgrounds to engage in meaningful conversations about healthy relationships, consensual sex, pregnancy, transmitted diseases, as well as sexual abuse. Sexuality is much more than sexual intercourse. It is about developing a healthy self-image, your identity, gender role, learning how to express yourself, but most importantly, your boundaries. I would like to thank Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito for her incredible collaboration on this piece of legislation, and thank you to the support of all the advocates, including the incredible organizations that are part of the Sex Education Alliance of New York City. And I also especially want to thank Councilmember Danny Drum for all of his support and leadership on this effort, and thank you so much to Mayor Bill de Blasio. We are going to create a safer city for all of our young people so that they can make the healthiest decisions in their adolescent years for their adult lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 1456A, Councilmember Karen Koslowitz.
I cannot imagine someone not looking for a restaurant's letter grade from our city's health department before deciding whether or not to patronize a restaurant. The A, B, C, or grade pending carries with it real significance. The letter grade has become absolutely essential as it relates to restaurants. Yet, every day, countless numbers of people in New York are expected to purchase food from a street vendor without knowing to a general degree the cart's compliance with the New York City Health Code. The customers who buy food from a street vendor deserve to have the same ability to make an informed decision as patrons of restaurants. I want to thank the speaker, Melissa Mark Viverito, and to you, Mayor de Blasio, for this legislation. I can't wait to have my first hot dog from a street vendor.
With a good grade.
With a good A, only A.
Only an A. Excellent. Thank you so much, Councilmember. Also want to thank, even though they couldn't be here, thank the Chair of the Committee on Government Services, Ben Kalos, and the Chair of the Health Committee, Corey Johnson, for their support as well. And now we are going to sign these bills.
No, that's not what that means. Not at all. Oh, no. Thank you so much. Thank you. You have it?
Did I get them all? I think I actually got them all. I did get them all. All of these bills are now locked. Okay. We're starting up the next set here, so come on in if you're here for the next bills. Okay.
What do you have now?
Let's bar the door now.
It's a condo conversion bill.
Bar the door. Okay. Bah, right? Okay, now we're going to consider a package of bills to make both tenants and workers safer. Intro 722A requires landlords to keep apartments at or above 62 degrees Fahrenheit during nighttime hours in the winter months. Intro 823A requires publication of a yearly report on the number of inspections conducted and violations issued for illegal housing conversions. Intro 1218A increases civil penalties for illegal conversion of 3 or more apartments in residential buildings, including houses. Intro 1586 imposes a 2-year moratorium on the conversion of some hotels to other uses. I want to thank Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, HPD Commissioner Maria Torres Springer, Buildings Commissioner Rick Chandler, Executive Director of Office of Special Enforcement, Christian Klausner. And now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 1586, Councilmember Richie Torres.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. You know, we in the City Council have real concerns that the trend of hotels converting to condos could destabilize New York City with a massive loss of middle-class employment at a time when middle-class life in the service sector in particular is vanishingly rare. Since 2008, we've lost 100,000 middle-class jobs. And I believe that the luxury and upper upscale sectors of the hotel industry play a singular role in advancing the city's mission of broadly shared prosperity. In what other industry can a formerly poor immigrant with less than a high school diploma earn enough income to build a decidedly middle-class life in the most expensive city in the world? And so for me, this bill is not only about the preservation of jobs, it's about the preservation of the American dream, and I'm proud to support it, and I thank you for your support.
Thank you. All right, now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 722A and the chair of the Committee on Housing and Buildings, Councilmember Jamani Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We tried to figure out how to get the least amount of press around a heating bill, so we did it at the beginning of summer.
Clever.
But I do want to thank first the Manhattan Borough President who had this bill before me and co-introduced it with me this session. It's Intro 722A. We're changing the minimum nighttime temperature of 62 degrees between October 1st and May 31st, regardless of the outdoor temperature. We are happy that we're doing this now so that it will be in place by October 1st, and we'll have enough time to provide information to tenants who need it. Sufficient heat is a quality of life that should not be ignored in the larger conversation of tenants' rights. Currently, the outdoor temperatures have to be 40 degrees to require a landlord to turn on the heat, and even then, the minimum indoor temperature mandates it only be 55 degrees. I often say I'm not sure if people understand how cold it feels in your house in the winter if it's only 55 degrees. And if you're healthy, it's very cold. If you're a senior or a young person who is sick with 55 degrees, it could be ending up exposing them to additional health risks. So I'm pleased that we're able to do this. Also, with the outside temperature, HPD testified sometimes the confusion of them trying to maintain the indoor when the outdoor temperature fluctuates up and down. Tenants didn't understand the laws. And I remember when I was doing tenant organizing, they would often be confused because they would call us and we'd have to tell them it can be 55 degrees, and that's only if it's 40. If it's more, you might be even worse out of luck. And so we're glad that we're able to do this. I want to thank the Commissioner Torres Springer, and I saw Vito, the ever President Vito Musachello from HPD. Again, Board President Gail Brewer, Megan Chen, Guillermo Patino, Jose Conde, Laura Popo, Matt Gawab, Jeff Baker, Ed Atkin, Mike Toomey from my staff, Nick Smith, formerly from my staff, now with the mayor, and of course, the Speaker, Melissa Marfarito.
Thank you very much. Now my pleasure to introduce the co-sponsor of Intro 722A, Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and certainly to Councilmember Williams. And I know that he talked about the bill, but you know, more than 200,000 heat and hot water problems were reported through 3/11 in 2015, 2016. Maybe it's about the same this winter past. HPD completed $2.7 million in heat-related emergency repairs charged to the owners, and HPD filed over 3,000 heat cases in court and collected $1.7 million in civil penalties against a little over 3,000 properties. And I mention all of that because it's a hard job. In addition to the fact that the tenants have challenges, it is very hard on the inspectors. We do what Vito tells us. And what Vito said is it is hard on the inspectors. We also do what Vito tells us. So it's exciting that this bill is passing, not just for the tenants, but I think for city workers. I think it'll make a big dent in simplifying the heat season rules to make enforcement practical, consistent. Swings in the outside temperature, which we're seeing more and more, above or below an arbitrary number, shouldn't leave a landlord or a tenant guessing on whether or not the heat should or should not be on or off. The fact that it's 56 degrees outside instead of 54, 55, doesn't mean anyone should have to cope with a 56-degree or colder apartment. It's May now, but you know what's coming in 205 days. It's called winter. And so I'm glad that this bill will be law, as the council member indicated in October, and it will help keep people warmer next winter, and it'll also help with another group of people for whom I have great respect, the city inspectors at HPD. Thank you very much.
You know what's coming in 22 days? Summer. So let's enjoy that. You were glad your bill's there, but let's enjoy summer first.
Yeah, as long as we pass the bill.
That's right.
Then we can enjoy summer?
That's good. And now the sponsor of Intro 1218A, Councilmember Vinnie Gentili.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 years ago, I stood with Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams and Councilmember Jumaane Williams on Flatbush Avenue by the ravaged remains of a building consumed by a fatal two-alarm fire. A security guard was killed and 15 others injured. The cause? Illegal residential conversions. Partitioning homes with shoddy construction, faulty wiring, and compromised gas work has become a common practice by predatory landlords. Maximizing profit at the expense of tenant safety has led to today's proliferation of illegal home conversions. This legislation, sponsored by Borough President Adams, myself, Councilmember Williams, and Councilmember Grodenchik, will make this unethical practice an unlawful one. We will codify a years-long rallying cry that has been echoed in civic organization gatherings and community board meetings across this city that substandard housing is not affordable housing. Focusing on the most egregious purveyors of illegal conversion, this legislation sets a $15,000 penalty on the unscrupulous owner for each illegally partitioned dwelling unit that is 3 or more units above the certificate of occupancy. To ensure remediation and payment of the violation, the fine constitutes a lien on the property. If unpaid for 1 year, it can be sold by the city. The intention here is to root out those profiteering landlords who partition entire buildings for maximum profit, thus endangering tenants, multiplying the threat to first responders, unaccountably stressing our infrastructure, and endangering our neighborhood's quality of life. In case of a fire, firefighters must navigate their way through a disjointed maze of subdivided units, possibly losing people in need of rescue along the way and endangering their own safety. Very few neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs are spared from this dangerous and inhumane predatory scheme, which accumulated over 50 311 complaints per day in 2016. The consequences of these conversions are tangible, with a clear increase in school overcrowding and a drain on our infrastructure and the health risks inherent in overcrowded tenements. Can I use
please
senior members' privilege?
Continue. You get special privilege. Yes,
Senior
senior privilege.
Okay, thank you. That means I'm old, yes. In addition, this legislation equips the Department of Buildings with tools necessary to obtain access warrant where it's unable to gain access in a building. All in all, this new law will serve as a strong deterrent on the front end and strong enforcement tools on the back. Let me thank, starting out the mayor's office's administration, the speaker and her staff, especially Megan Chin, Jen Wilcox, Laura Popa, my staff, Legislative Director Jonathan Shapshehis, who really was a persistent advocate and guided the bill through many, many drafts, Borough President Eric Adams and his staff, Andrew Gennardis, the legal counsel, and specifically his special assistant and our former colleague Lou Fidler, who's among us today, who's worked on this issue for decades in multiple capacities before and after his councilman tenure. Councilmember Jomani Williams, chair of the Housing and Buildings Committee, Councilmember Barry Grudenchik, a prime co-sponsor of the bill, the Brooklyn Housing Preservation Alliance, Neighborhood Housing Services of Brooklyn, the Asian Community United Society, Queens Civic Congress, Broadway Flushing Homeowners Association, Brooklyn Community Board 10, and all advocates, partners, and stakeholders who have supported our efforts throughout these years. This landmark legislation will truly save the lives of marginalized and victimized tenants, protect our city's first responders, and maintain our community's quality of life. So I thank you, we all thank you, Mr. Mayor, for signing it into law today.
Thank you very much, Councilman. I want to also welcome our colleague Lou Fidler. Welcome back. And you'll be pleased to know some of your most focused concerns in your days in the council, including homeless and runaway youth and summer youth employment, are both doing very, very well since then. So thanks for the good work you did to get the momentum going on both those issues. Would like to now introduce the sponsor of Intro 823A, Councilmember Adonis Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Illegal conversion are unacceptable and we have to stop it now. I would like to thank the Speaker, Melissa Margarito, our staff, as well as my colleagues for their support in getting this legislation passed. As has been often mentioned, we are facing a crisis when it comes to affordable housing. This crisis is made deeper when existing affordable housing is illegally converted into short-term hotels for the use of tourists and others. This is something I've seen in my community, uptown, and throughout the whole city, and I know that many of my colleagues face similar conditions. Intro 823-A will highlight where the majority of these violations are occurring, who the landlords are of these buildings, and where we must focus enforcement resources to hold them accountable. Affordable housing is too desperately needed for us to let it slip away, and that's why I'm proud to sponsor this bill. I'd like to thank HPD Commissioner and Vito here too, great ally in this effort on preservation and also enforcement, also as the Chairman of the Housing Committee, Jomani Williams. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now my pleasure to introduce the co-sponsor of Intro 1218A, Councilmember Barry Grudenchik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to invoke junior member privilege here because I'm not quite senior yet. Councilmember Gentili called the legislation landmark, and it truly is. Nearly 30 years ago, I went to work for my hero, my mentor, Assemblywoman Nettie Mayerson, who is celebrating a birthday today. She's 93 today. Wow. So I'm going to call her in a few minutes. But this legislation is truly landmark. The people in the communities that we represent, and I see Tyler Cassell and Kevin Forrestall are here from the Queens Civic Congress. They have been waiting a generation for this legislation. So I want to thank Vinny for his strong advocacy here. I want to thank the chair of the committee, Jomani Williams, Borough President Adams, and his staff, my staff, Steve Behar, worked on this legislation as well, and most importantly, our speaker, and of course you, Mr. Mayor, for signing this common sense legislation that will undoubtedly save lives. So thank you.
Thank you, and please wish Nettie a very happy birthday.
I will.
And now we have a special request. I guess you're a medium. You had the senior member privilege, junior member. You're a medium member privilege. Jomani Williams is asked to speak on Intro 1218A.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Whatever privilege it takes, I appreciate it. Also, one of the co-sponsors, but I did want to speak on this bill. I think it's a very important bill. I want to thank Councilmember Gentili for pushing it through. We did stand in Flatbush, and there were some people who actually died in my district because of the bill that we are addressing here today. And there were people who were trying to obfuscate what we're trying to do, pretending we were aiming at some people, taking away housing. We weren't doing anything of the sort. The fact of the matter is, this was the bottom feeders, people who are taking advantage of a very horrible affordable housing crisis and making people live in very dangerous conditions. That can't be acceptable in any way, form, or fashion, and government is here to make sure that those advantages don't take place. This is not going after grandma who has an attic or a basement apartment. This is about people who are the most egregious actors. If you have 3, 4, 5 units in a 1-unit apartment, it is dangerous. And that's all that we are saying, and there's no one that can disagree with that. So I think the council and administration has done a great job of getting this bill here. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor and Vinny.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. We have one person signed up for public testimony on this same piece of legislation, Warren Chan of the Asian Community United Society. Just go right over to the microphone there.
Hi, yeah, I want to thank the mayor, city council, and the speaker on these bills, and on behalf of Asian Community United Society, that we want to thank Vinny for introducing this bill, because there's lots of home buyers out there that really want to purchase a home, want to live in the communities, and these greedy developers have taken away from them because of their greed. They just buy the house, they don't live there, they're not part of the community, they just buy it and then start chopping the house. Well, the real people, the real homeowners, real home buyers want to live in the communities. They have to compete with them, which is very unfair. As a previous home buyers, I also face the same thing. I have to pay a lot more for the home that I want to live in while competing with these developers. So I hope that this bill will tell these developers to stop doing this and then give real home buyers a chance to compete in this market. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, let's sign these bills. Jimani, you are first. Of course, come on up. Okay. We have conflict. 12. We have enough pens. We have enough pens. 7 and 5. 12. 12.
Thank you very much.
Your bills live on. So how many with 7 and 5? You'll tell me when I get to 7. How's that? Building safety. All 3 siblings, you will tell them. We'll share. Thank you very much. We need it here. You done? Oh, the white, oh, yeah, no, he's a better one. And then it would break. Wait, we've got another Jamani. No, wait, it's Joel. All you You've been on this one for a long time. You deserve 12 minutes. Take a moment. Well done. Congratulations. Wow. Thank you for those. Still in the Bronx. These bills are now law. All right. How did I do? You were great. I tried to play the other. Yeah. Always. Yes. Excuse me. Excuse me. Thank you. All right. Now we will discuss package of bills to make motorists and cyclists safer. Intro 518A requires used car dealers to notify purchasers of vehicles subject to federal government-issued recalls. Intro 1117A makes existing rules, for commercial cyclists applicable to those working as independent contractors. They must now have identification numbers and bicycles fitted with safety equipment, including lights and bells. Intro 1177A mandates a study of the effect on pedestrian safety of programming traffic lights with the Barnes dance. This protocol stops vehicular traffic in every direction of a given intersection to allow pedestrians to cross. Intro 1285A creates a pedestrian study to offer recommendations for safety improvements at 6 heavily trafficked areas. Intro 1305A requires the Parks Department to post notification about temporary parking restrictions for tree removal at least 2 days before the restrictions begin. I want to thank Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, Transportation Commissioner Polly Trottenberg, Parks Commissioner Mitchell Silver, Chair of the Committee on Parks and Recreation, Councilmember Mark Levine, and now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 1117A, Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for being here and signing our important piece of legislation. A few years ago, the council passed a bill of mine that required that all delivery cyclists wear reflective vests and have identification and other safety measures, including some training and a helmet. And we're very proud of that bill. And every day you see thousands of bicycle delivery, men and women delivering our meals and other goods a little bit more safely because of that bill. However, with the rise of Seamless, Uber Eats, Amazon, and other independent folks, there's been a loophole that we found, and this bill effectively closes that loophole, making sure that every cyclist, including those who are delivering for Uber Eats, Amazon, and Seamless and others, are in fact getting those reflective vests, helmets, bells, and other safety measures, which is going to make it safer for them, safer for pedestrians, safer for motorists, and incredibly important at night when folks are delivering, oftentimes in the winter, your dinner and mine, when folks are having a little bit harder time seeing everything on the road. They'll be able to see these delivery cyclists. So this is a common sense measure to keep the streets safe and make sure that all of the people delivering our meals are even safer. So I am very, very proud of the legislation. I want to particularly thank Andres Fija, my Deputy Chief of Staff, for working on this legislation, as well as the entire staff of the council. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. And now, my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 1177A, Councilmember Helen Rosenthal.
Thank you very much. I want to thank my co-sponsors, Idanis Rodriguez and Matthew Eugene, on this bill. Since my first day in office, safety has been a top priority. On the Upper West Side, we've had simply too many tragedies for it to be anything else. Through Vision Zero and under the leadership of the Department of Transportation, we've made some important improvements over the last 4 years, but we've set our sights on truly safe streets, on reaching 0 fatalities. And so on behalf of all New Yorkers, we can't be content, even for a moment, with incremental progress. I'm very pleased that my Barnes Dance legislation is being signed into law today. There's been a lot of public interest in the bill, and I think it's partially because people like saying the word Barnes Dance. But the main reason for the interest in this bill is that it speaks to an issue that far too many New Yorkers have experienced directly, or they know someone who has. In New York, 1 in 4 crashes that kill or injure pedestrians happen when they're in the crosswalk with the signal. This law challenges us to make those pedestrians in the crosswalk the top priority, to unmake the mistakes of 50 years of car-exclusive street design. This administration and this council are putting pedestrians back where they should be, in control of our streets. I do, however, want to thank my communications director, who has probably gotten me in pretty much every media outlet with the Barnes Dance legislation. And of course, to Councilmember Rodriguez, Chair of the Transportation Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And speaking of Idanis Rodriguez, my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 1285A and Chair of the Transportation Committee, Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I would like to thank the Speaker for all her support and the staff of the Committee of Transportation. I'm proud to say that I've been a co-lead with both 1177A and 17-A with both of my colleagues, Councilmember Van Bramer and Rosenthal. Intro 1285-A, that I'm the leading one, is something that we believe it is so important because this legislation took an increased importance in recent weeks when we saw the event on the sidewalk. Pedestrian can be put in the Times Square. Pedestrian can be put in danger, and that on our most crowded sidewalks, that danger is amplified. When a car can drive into the sidewalk, we know it can do serious damage. We were exposed to this in Times Square, and we see it happen far too often. Even when it is unintentional, it increased the urgency we face in fortifying, and easing crowding on our sidewalks. Intro 1285-A will require DOT to study and provide solutions to our most congested sidewalks in New York City. I'm pleased to say that this has begun along 7th Avenue in Midtown, with plans to increase sidewalk space and ease some of this crowding. We are taking an innovative approach to this issue, and I hope to see DOT go even further than it required number in the bill. Pedestrians are the most vulnerable street users, especially when it's our children and our seniors, and we must do everything in our power to make them safe. I want to thank all the members of transportation, all the staff of the Transportation Committee, and I would like to also thank Stephanie Rodriguez, who is my recent staff here from the Committee of Transportation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now the sponsor of Intro 1305, Councilmember Rafael Salamanca.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today I'm pleased that we are signing Intro 1305 into law, which would require the Department of Parks and Recreation to post notices of the effective date of temporary parking restrictions relating to tree removal at least 2 days before the commencement of such restrictions, with certain exceptions. This legislation was a community-driven effort aiming to provide a simple fix to an issue that can affect all of us in our daily lives. Simply, this bill says that not less than 2 days prior to the commencement of temporary parking restrictions on any street or roadway for the purpose of removal of trees by the department shall post notice of the effective date of such restrictions on such streets or roadways, unless the planned work is to occur in accordance with other existing parking restrictions, such as alternate site parking regulations. Such notification shall include the effective date of such restrictions, the location of such restrictions, and the estimated end date of such restrictions. The department will also be tasked with notifying the community boards where said work is occurring. An exception is made in the bill to allow the department to act when it is immediately necessary to preserve public safety. With that said, I'm proud to be with Mayor de Blasio to sign this legislation into law, ensuring that a community gets ample notice of when off-street parking will be affected by tree maintenance simply makes sense, and I'm proud that today we're doing just that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 518, my apology, 518A, Councilmember Donovan Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm proud to be here today to ensure that secondhand dealers or used car dealerships are honest with their customers when selling a vehicle that has had a recall. Everybody has heard or experienced stories or know stories about someone who's had the misfortune of buying a lemon, or as what we deem a hoopty in my neighborhood, that has had problems after leaving the car dealer. We are here today to provide protections for consumers looking to buy a used vehicle. With the passage of Intro 518A, a second-hand automobile dealer will be required to disclose recall information to consumers when selling automobiles, parts, or equipment. This disclosure must be signed by the purchaser and retained by the dealer for 5 years. This bill would impose a $1,000 fine for a first offense, a $1,000 fine or imprisonment for a second offense, and a suspension or revocation of a dealer's license at the discretion of the commissioner for any additional offenses during a 3-year period. We must hold dealers accountable when they withhold vital information that could affect a consumer's decision, their own well-being, and the safety, most importantly, of their families and New Yorkers as well. I'd like to thank Mayor de Blasio, Speaker Melissa Mark-Viverito, the Council's Consumer Affairs Chair, Rafael Espinal, DCA Commissioner Salas, the Consumer Affairs Committee staff, Balkis Mahiring and Israel Martinez, and my Legislative Director, Jordan Gibbons. Let's get these hoopties into shape. Thank you.
Thank you for your commentary. And now for public testimony, I want to welcome Susan Bieber of the Greater New York Auto Dealers Association.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, I'm here on behalf of the Greater New York Automobile Dealers Association to support this legislation. At the association, we wholeheartedly support disclosure and education for all consumers purchasing automobiles. It is, as we all know, one of the most expensive purchases anyone can make, and disclosure and education, we're here to support that wholeheartedly. So thank you to the City Council, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, let's sign these bills.
Thank you.
Donovan, you going first? First, come on. How many we need here? Great. Six. Hey. Are we there? Are we at 6? We're at 6. We're holding at 6. Okay. I need the pen. Take the pen. And then each other's. That's right. Now shake hands. This is really quite simple. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay. Yeah. He's only been doing it for 3 years, but that's okay. He's very adept at it. He'll do it if you want.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
See, you did it right away. You figured that out. You figured that out.
Part of transparency now.
You figured that out the first time. I want you to think about that. Okay, Jimmy. 3. You will do it the right way. Take it. You did it right. That worked. Very graceful, Jimmy. Graceful. There's nothing more important than that. He's got you. There you go. Nervous. All right, you got a lot back in. Okay, I'm just going to get one more. There you go. How many times? You got to do it. It's got a ring to it. Oh, Helen. So let's go really great. Yes. Come on up.
Yeah, I really am. But it is fascinating how many hits we got with media. And I
is very happy about
yeah, it's all got to do with barn stands.
How many would you like?
3. Thank you very much.
The excellent form there, Helen. Some of your colleagues could have learned from you, Donovan.
Well, he's got a switch. Thank you.
Just watch the mayor, I just came to a 9 hour here.
Watch Helen, Donovan.
Donovan, you have to stick around for the next time. Can you text Costa? Okay, you're there. You done it. I don't think the Republicans are going to have to caucus around the budget.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Oh, there you are. Karen is in These bills are now on. Congratulations, everyone. Well, I made him law too quickly. Hold on. It's getting late. You're right. Yeah. Three? Okay. I'm out of line. Good to see you. Hold on. Yes. 9 more bills? Yes. Oh, to be a secret? Yes. 9. Yeah, this time for sure, everybody. One of my bills. Now these bills are all. Okay, so well done. Well done, everyone. Yeah, I'm gonna lose our bunch. In the midst of history, you'll appreciate it. A long time and many, many lives ago. Okay. Here we go. Okay, here we go, everyone. This is the last group of bills. We'll now consider a package of bills aimed at improving the Board of Standards and Appeals. Intro 1282A codifies existing practice by requiring the BSA to respond to comments on some applications. Intro 418A codifies existing practice by requiring the BSA to offer a written response to Community Board or Borough Board recommendations on some special permits and variances. Intro 514A requires the BSA to notify property owners that variances on their properties may be about to expire and that penalties may apply for failing to conform to an approved use. Intro 1200A requires the BSA to note on its website that copies of an initial application or proposal have been sent to city agencies, council members, community boards, and borough presidents as required. Intro 1390A requires DCP to identify a BSA coordinator on its website and post copies of testimony DCP submits to the BSA on any variance or special permit application. Intro 1391A requires the BSA to ensure an appraiser is available to aid in its decision-making processes. Intro 1392A sets requirements for specific materials to be included in BSA applications and codifies the BSA's existing practice of referring false statements to the board to DOI. Intro 1393A requires the BSA to create annual and public reports on special permits and variances. Intro 1394A requires the variance and special permit data to be added to the city's interactive map. I want to thank Speaker Melissa Mark-Viverito, the chair of the BSA, Marjorie Perlmutter, the City Planning Commission Chair, Marissa Lago, and now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 282A, Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer.
Thank you very much once again, Mr. Mayor. I am very excited about this package, the entire package, and our piece. And my 7.5 years in the council, a few issues have vexed my community board and civic associations than the Board of Standards and Appeals and their requests and how they handle variance requests. So we're thrilled because too many times folks have said, why should we speak up we're never heard, our arguments are never taken into account, and oftentimes it is felt like a bit of a black hole. So we are very, very pleased that 282 will add a layer of transparency and public accountability to the process and require the board to talk about the extent to which they consider public comment and public opposition and how they address concerns and dissent from the public, community boards, and elected officials. We have had numerous instances where that has not worked the way the community felt it should, and we're pleased that this council and the Speaker and our Chair, Ben Kalos, and you, Mr. Mayor, are signing these bills into law to make sure that community members are heard, that their input is taken seriously, and when there are disagreements, that those disagreements are actually enumerated so that folks know that there was a point to them getting involved and being civically engaged, and really to encourage them to continue to voice their opinions on the future of their neighborhood. So thrilled with the package, very, very pleased with this bill, and I want to thank my Chief of Staff, Matt Wallace, and my Deputy Chief of Staff, once again, Andres Sevilla, for all their help in making this possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to note and thank two bill sponsors who could not be with us, Councilmember Karen Koslowitz and Councilmember Steve Matteo. Now my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 1200A, Councilmember Donovan Richards.
Good afternoon, once again, Mr. Mayor, and I'm proud to be here once again to ensure that the Board of Standard and Appeals does its fair share of accountability when it comes to applicants notifying communities and elected officials about applications in their neighborhoods. Intro 1200A will require developers, as you said, to send applications to council members, borough presidents, and community boards by certified mail or any method that provides proof of service. The BSA is then required to post on its website that the proof of delivery was received and verified. While it was shocking to hear that the BSA does not track these instances where applicants do not follow through on this required step in the process, today we are correcting that. Whether these applicants were trying to sneak by this important notification or perhaps were just sloppy, this requirement will ensure that the BSA is working with communities and elected officials and not against us. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, once again, Speaker Melissa Mark-Viverito, the Government Operations Committee, Council Brad Reed, Ben Kalos, and my Legislative Director, Jordan Gibbons.
Thank you very much. And now the very busy sponsor of intros 1398, 1391A, 1392A, 1393A, and 1394A, Councilmember Ben Kalos. It's all on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. After more than 40 years, we're reforming the Board of Standards and Appeals to empower everyday New Yorkers in city planning. As Chair of the Committee on Governmental Operations, I'm pleased to have passed 9 bills that aim to reform applications, decisions, notifications, staffing, and transparency around the Board of Standards and Appeals to be more accountable to the public. The BSA is a 5-member body tasked with reviewing requests for variances and special permits to relieve developers from obligations to build affordable housing or follow city planning in the zoning law, restricting building forms, residential uses in commercial or manufacturing districts, heights, even density. Every community board, and dare I say it, every council member seems to have a story where the BSA granted a special permit or variance over their objections. The bills have bipartisan support from the Democratic Majority Leader Van Bramer, Republican Minority Leader Matteo, and Zoning Chair Richards, as well as the Queens Delegation Chair Koslowitz. The fight for these reforms started more than 40 years ago in 1976 with a report by the Municipal Art Society, which released another study nearly 30 years later in 2004. And these riveting reports were the inspiration for this package of legislation. The reforms continued with the prior Governmental Operations Chair, Garrett Brewer, with legislation by council members Van Bramer and Koslowitz. I was proud to continue as the new chair because it's important that government is transparent and accountable to the people. The legislation will reform applications by setting minimum requirements for developers to show why zoning laws should not apply to them, with fines up to $15,000 for knowingly falsifying information. To designate a coordinator at City Planning Commission to defend the zoning text from unnecessary variances, providing expertise in the form of a state-certified real estate appraiser on staff to review, providing transparency, an interactive online map. And I just want to thank the Speaker, Majority Leader Van Bramer, Minority Leader Matteo, Koslowitz, Richards, our committee counsel Brad Reed, Smita Deshmukh, Rachel Cordero, Julie Lubin, Dylan Casey, my legislative director Paul Westrick, as well as the Municipal Art Society. And thank you, Mayor, for signing these bills today. We've got 9, and it's very close to the 10 that we'll be celebrating tonight as we celebrate Shavuos. And so thank you.
Wrap that together very nicely, Councilman. And you mentioned several times the Municipal Arts Society. We're very honored to have the president with us, Elizabeth Goldstein.
Thank you. MAS has long advocated for efficiency and transparency across the land use process. We applaud Mayor de Blasio, the City Council, and Councilmember Kalos in particular for enacting these sensible pieces of legislation. In 1976 and in 2004, MAS released landmark studies identifying the abuse and misuse of New York City's variance process. We showed that clustered variances have effectively resulted in a rezoning of certain communities without taking into account the cumulative impacts on light and air, traffic, planning, parking, school capacity, and other services. This piecemeal approach has given the Board of Standards and Appeals authority that is intended for the City Planning Commission and left neighborhoods without a means to manage the wholesale changes taking place around them. The bills signed today reflect many of our recommendations and will create transparency and help rationalize the process for neighborhoods and seek to preserve their unique identity and character. Thank you so much for signing these bills today.
Thank you very much. Before we sign legislation, I'm just going to do a quick summary of all the legislation that we have considered today en español. Con las 28 leyes que estoy firmando hoy, damos a los empleados de comercios y comidas rápidas el derecho a rechazar cambios de horario del último minuto. Mejoramos la información que tienen los neoyorquinos antes de votar. Los carritos de comidas serán calificados de manera similar a los restaurantes. Aseguramos que todos los inquilinos tengan calefacción adecuada. Los mensajeros deben tener identificación, luces y timbres en sus bicicletas. Los vendedores deben avisar a sus clientes cuando un auto es retirado por el gobierno federal y mejoramos la transparencia del sistema de uso de suelos. With that, we will now sign this big stack of bills.
Drop it? Oh, yeah.
Three. Here we go. Graceful. Graceful. Excellent. Excellent. See, good student. So this one is puzzles. One. I'll give that to you. And Mario say? Now Donovan Richards. Okay, watch close there, Ron. How many do I know? Three. Here's the first one, Donovan. No, surprise. That's not a good look. Look serious.
Natural.
That's not serious. Okay, that's probably good. That's too serious. We need to really, he needs a seminar here.
Yeah, seriously. Okay.
Is this all Kalos all the time? Yep.
5.
5 total or 5?
If we can do,
Well, there's 5 bills, so.
so if we do 5 on the first bill and then 1 on each additional.
Quite well said. Thank you, sir. Well done. Thank you. Congratulations. Congratulations. And then 1 per each. Unless you want one. Very considerate.
Could have been multiple more bills.
It could have been what?
That could have been more than 1 bill.
Is that a good thing? Happy to have fewer bills.
That's how I feel. The council likes to split them up.
This is an active restraint on the council's part.
How many bills did we sign today?
28?
28.
28. Got a record. Maybe.
Well, there are 23 though, where the campaign finance firm.
Please slow down a little bit. You've really done quite well.
Very well.
Excellent, excellent. Congratulations. Pleasure. Appreciate it. Well done. Sir. All these bills are now law, and this hearing is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Just leave that here. Just some breaks for the last.
Thanks.